All right, cool. I'm here with Dan Canobbio. Dan, we're at the Lamont Roach for Gervonta Davis. First press conference. Give us your initial thoughts on what this fight has in store for us.
I think it's a sneaky good fight. I know a lot of fans want to see Gervonta Davis in there with some bigger names, but I also think that this could be a tricky test for Gervonta Davis. We know that he's a slow starter, and we know that he has devastating power, and that makes for really exciting fights. We've seen it in the last couple of fights for Gervonta, outside of the Ryan Garcia fight where he kind of knocked him down early. His last fight, in particular against Frank Martin, he got off to a slow start. He routinely throws like 15, 20 punches around, and when that happens, you end up losing rounds. And Lamont Roach is a very, very tricky boxer. He might not have a lot of power, but he's a very tricky boxer, and I could see him giving Tank problems early. I'm not saying that Lamont Roach can win the fight, but I could see him giving Tank issues to the point where maybe Tank's down on the cards and has to, find that bomb again. But I think it's a really tricky, underrated type of fight for Tank Davis, and I think it could end up being a really fun fight too.
This is happening in New York. A lot of the top fighters are fighting in Vegas, LA, on the West Coast. How big is it for boxing to have these big events on the East Coast in New York, where history has always been here in New York in boxing?
A lot of fighters are fighting in Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
Fighting in the Middle East. I mean, that is the place to be right now. We just announced an unbelievable card on February 22nd. But you're right. I think New York will always be the Mecca. I'm a little biased because I'm from New York, but it's nice to see fights here on the East Coast. Tank has fought here numerous times. It will be a sellout crowd on March 1st.
March 1st, yeah.
And you have Lamont Roach, who is from the D.C. area. You have Tank is from the D.C. area. If it wasn't going to be in D.C., I always believed it should be here in New York, where his fans and the fans can hop on a train or drive quickly to get here. So I think it's going to be absolutely wild on fight night here at Barclays.
You mentioned the card in Saudi Arabia. Why were you getting so much pushback? I think it might have the case for one of the best cards ever, if not the best already.
The only pushback I got was from old boxing fans who believed that everything was better back in their day. Don King put on better cards. Listen, Don King put on awesome cards. I'm not saying he didn't. There were 5, 6 deep. There were big names, but this card is different because it's 7 deep, and I think that 5 of the 7 are 50-50 fights. There are fights where either side can win. I think that the only real mismatch on paper is Shakur versus Floyd Schofield, which, I give major props to Schofield for stepping up and taking that fight, but Shakur's on another level. But even that fight's exciting because you have a puncher in Schofield versus all-world defensive fighter in Shakur. But, a lot of fight fans want to live in the past, and they want to say, back in my day was better. Don King, you're wrong, young one. I'm like, come on. Listen, it's in the discussion. It's in the discussion.
Last question here. What was your experience with Netflix? That was a huge event, a lot of eyes. Were you nervous? I mean, you looked you looked like you did great, sounded great. What was going through your mind through that whole event?
If you don't have nerves, then you're not human. It's one of the biggest events I'll ever work. It was an awesome event. You can say what you will about the fight, but the event and the marketing that went into it, and Netflix's budget is absolutely wild. Netflix, when they want to get behind something, they just throw caution to the wind when it comes to marketing. I thought it was an unbelievably marketed fight, an event, and I'm curious to see if Netflix will get into boxing again. One thing I think we saw was that if the fight is big enough, you could put it on a streaming service and everyone can still get paid because there's a way to do it. There's a way for everyone to still get paid at the end of the day. It doesn't necessarily have to be on pay-per-view. It was an awesome experience. From a personal standpoint, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, working with Kate Abdo, and being able to relay some odds from DraftKings was an awesome night.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan.